Next from Springfield, we attend a press conference where several school administrators discuss the different proposals and details offered in the Vision 2020 Public Education Initiative. The initiative is comprised of 4 areas for prioritization: highly effective educators, 21st century learning, shared accountability, and equitable and adequate funding. This runs about 30 minutes.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming. This morning's press conference is for the purpose of rolling out the plan we call Vision 2020, which is a comprehensive package of solutions to address student-related issues in public education across Illinois. This plan has been in development for roughly 2 years, and it encompassed planning sessions across those 2 years, including roughly 70 educators from every region of the state of Illinois. And their work was triggered by a survey that we did of districts at the very beginning of the work that really determined from the districts that we are a highly overregulated state, producing enormous inefficiencies, creating inequalities, and severely underfunded. But instead of complaining about those issues, this comprehensive package brings solutions to the table that we believe are common sense, doable in Illinois, and would provide a better public education for our kids going forward. I'd like to introduce our partners on this statewide initiative. We have 6 groups that were part of this, including my group, the Illinois Association of School Administrators, and I'm Brent Clark representing them. And then with us today is Jason Leahy, Executive Director of the Illinois Principals Association, Dr. Michael Jacoby, who's Executive Director of the Illinois Association of School Business Officials, Roger Eddy, Executive Director of the Illinois Association of School Boards, Dr. Pat Del Santo, who is the President of the Illinois Association of Regional School Superintendents, and then Craig Williams, who's the President of the Superintendent's Commission for the Study of Demographics and Diversity. All 6 of our organizations went together, partnered on this important work because we believe that Illinois children are a great asset. There's 2.1 million of them. We believe there's a promise of public education to fulfill to them, and this plan is a great step in that direction. So what we'd like to do real briefly is just kind of go over the highlighted parts of this, what we call the 4 pillars. And to start that out, I'd turn it over to Roger Eddy with the School Board Association. Roger?
Thank you, Dr. Clark. Just briefly to mention the 4 pillars that we're going to be talking about are highly effective educators, 21st century learning, shared accountability, and the 4th is equitable and adequate funding. I want to briefly discuss our vision for highly effective educators and boil down the recommendations that we have for policies that should be pursued by the state related to this pillar. First of all, we believe that it is of utmost importance that we recruit and retain high-impact educators. To do that, we think that immediately we need to work on reciprocity agreements with other states that allow highly effective educators from outside of Illinois to come into this state and very quickly assume classroom teaching positions. We also think we need to expand the alternative teaching licensure program and make sure that those folks who want to come into education have a clear and quality path in order to change careers and come into the classroom and be educators. We believe that there should be a student loan forgiveness program established in the state that would allow us to recruit and retain teachers for our hardest to staff schools. And we also think that we need to establish deeper partnerships with higher education in order to better train and qualify these individuals for our classrooms. The second area under highly effective educators that we think is of importance is to provide relevant professional development, and that means we have to fully fund mentoring programs for our new teachers. Teacher induction and mentoring programs are very important to the success of teachers those first several years. The funding for those programs has dried up over the last several years, and we believe that it's important that we reestablish specific appropriations for those purposes. We also think that we should expand the educator collaboration opportunities, both across grade level and across school districts around the state. The final public policy recommendation under this pillar is that we enhance the ROEs and the ISCs, the Regional Office of Education, and the Service Centers' ability to function efficiently in a regional manner. So just to recap, related to recommended state policies, recruiting and retaining high impact educators, we need to create education licensure reciprocity agreements, expand the alternative teaching licensure program, provide teacher student loan forgiveness, and establish partnerships with higher education. And related to providing professional development, we need to fully fund those mentoring and induction programs, expand educator collaboration opportunities, and better use efficiently our ROEs and ISCs. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Jason Leahy of the Principals Association.
Good morning. Again, my name is Jason Leahy. I'm the Executive Director for the Illinois Principals Association. And as I've been a part of this visioning project now for the last couple of years, not only have I looked through the lens of being the Executive Director for IPA, a former high school principal, former high school teacher, but also as an individual who has 5 children who are either in our public schools or about to be. My wife Ashley and I, we have a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old. So we have a 5th, 3rd, and 1st grader and 2 more to come. And as parents of young children, as we look at their educational career in front of them, we want to make sure that we're giving them 21st century learning experiences so that they can be successful after they graduate from school. And one of the things that educators across the state and also in collaboration and talking with parents that we've had some concerns with lately is concerns about narrowing of curriculum and too much emphasis on assessment when it comes to educating our children. And so that's what this policy brief attempts to address in this 21st century learning section. So a few of the policy recommendations that we're looking at is first looking at the whole child and ensuring that the educational experience contains all the things that will help kids be successful, in addition to making sure that they know how to read and do mathematics. So within developing the whole child, we want to ensure that we align our social emotional standards with the learning standards. We know that for individuals to be successful in the workplace, they've got to know how to get along well with others, so this is critical. We want to encourage student creativity and innovation in our students. One of the foundations for this country and our economic spirit here is really supporting these attributes in kids, and we know that helps for a successful economy. We want to promote individualized learning and giving kids opportunities not only to progress as they see best fit for their educational experience and as they attain standards, but also allowing them to lean into the things that they're passionate about. We want to make sure, finally, within this whole child component, that we engage parents and communities effectively. We know that this is critical. After developing the whole child, another key tenet for our policy recommendation is to ensure that we preserve an instructional time. And to do this, we believe that it's critical that we have a balanced state assessment system. We know that in the press and in communities, there's been a lot of dialogue currently about the park and other state assessments that are occurring. We believe that a policy conversation needs to occur where we talk about not only the park assessment, but also all of the assessments that schools are currently giving to kids at the local level, at the school level. And we also want to make sure that we look at assessment not just purely for accountability purposes, but more importantly, that we refocus assessment for what it's there for, and that is to make sure that we get this feedback on our students so that we can inform the instructional process, because that's where it's really meaningful for our students and their educational experience. Next overarching policy tenet is to guarantee that we invest fully into early childhood education. We know that getting that investment early will not only save us money, but will help those kids be successful later. We want to ensure that we're linking students to college and career experiences. We want to strengthen the relationships between K-12 education and higher education, as well as ensure that we've got high-quality relationships between our public schools and the business community, so that kids have the opportunities to have those experiences at a young age and maybe find out what they're passionate about, and then we'll be able to entertain those careers post-graduation. Finally, and this policy recommendation not only, I believe, deals with an educational issue and giving kids wide educational experiences, but also it's economic, and that is to ensure that every community in every corner of this state has access to high-quality broadband. We know that this is important, again, not only from an educational perspective, but we know that this is critical for our economy as well when you consider how much is online now with regards to goods and services. So again, dealing with 21st century learning, we want to make sure that we're developing the whole child. We want to preserve instructional time. We want to invest in early childhood education. We want to make sure that we link students to college and career opportunities. We want to make sure that we expand equity and technology access, particularly with broadband access. And now to go over our next 10, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Brent Clark.
So you're beginning to get the feel that in the Vision 2020 plan, there's varying pillars that support the entire plan. So Mr. Eddy covered the 21st century learning. the highly effective educators. Mr. Leahy covered the 21st century learning. The third pillar of the plan talks about shared accountability. And in shared accountability, there are some policy recommendations that emerged from the 2 years of work. First and foremost was the fact that over the last probably 10 to 12 years, we've had the privilege and really the benefit of having veteran educators serve on the State Board of Education. Over the last few years, though, we've had an enormous amount of reform that's been implemented in our schools, and we believe that we should consider some policy that allows the statutes to be changed to allow current educators to have some sitting roles on the State Board of Education, the Illinois State Board of Education. So we will be recommending that going forward and be looking at statutory changes to make that effective, hopefully in the near future. The second piece that emerged from this particular work around shared accountability was something that we call a differentiated accountability model. For layman's terms, that means what measurement system are we going to judge a school based on? What's the program to determine if a school is doing a good job or a bad job? And that's an accountability system in a school district. So we're looking at some of the classic pieces, but also something new. The classic pieces are, of course, the growth of the students over time, but also the compliance piece that's necessary based on all the statutes that are written that holds schools accountable and compliant with specific state laws. But the third piece, which is new in this accountability model, gets at the relevance of what a school does locally that benefits its students and its taxpayers. Much like you see in the financial sector, where a bank is compared to itself for the purposes of its own shareholders and customers, we could see a model developing here where a school district is held responsible against itself for what it does relative to its own taxpayers and its own students. So that's the second policy recommendation that will be coming out. The third deals with the myriad and mountain, if you will, of mandates that we have in Illinois related to education. And in the business sector, we call that regulations, and in the educational sector, we call it mandates. They're one and the same, and we believe there has to be a full and thorough review of all of the regulatory mandates that are placed on schools, and begin that process with a real sensible and logical discussion about what is essential, so what's federally required, what's fully funded, what's civil rights based, what's student safety, and call those things essential mandates. And then what's discretionary could be those things that are not funded, those things that are not federal, those things that are not related to student safety, those things that are process related. Those things could become discretionary. We want to have that conversation. We believe there's a lot of work that could be done around that would free up school districts to target their revenues and their spending best for their kids if they have that local control to make those decisions. And finally, coming on the heels of that and really tying into the next pillar, which is funding, is this piece. That if a school district is willing to forego state support for their school district, and they're willing to raise their money locally, plus a little bit from the federal government, that then they should be allowed to opt out of state mandates and state regulations that are relative to discretionary type things. So that leads us down the path toward the funding model that we want to suggest, which is the fourth pillar. And for that, I'd introduce Dr. Mike Jacoby, who's the Executive Director of the Illinois Association of School Boards.
Hi, I'm Mike Jacoby, Executive Director of the Association of School Business Officials, just to correct that.
I'm sorry.
I don't want to take Roger's job here. I want to talk about three things. How we fund schools, the need for stabilization of funding in Illinois for schools, and then how we fund schools so that we can eliminate inefficiencies. Three things that we think are really, really important today. And so that return on investment is something that we really think needs to be considered when we talk about building a school model. When we identify what the model should look like, we can identify the costs. And then that actually communicates to our legislators as well as to our local communities, what does it cost to provide an adequate education for students in every community across Illinois. That particular model was developed in 2010 through a study in Illinois, and we believe it's important for us to go to that model and start with that kind of a study to determine what our target is for adequacy in Illinois. What we really don't want to see is only a focus on equity, because we do not want to be equitably inadequate. That's not the definition really in our minds of a quality and appropriate funding model for education. Now, in order to do that, we also have to have some stabilization in state funds for education. We've lost over $1 billion in education funding over the last 4 years. We've been stagnant and decreasing in that, both at the state level and at the local level as well. Now, granted, we came out of a great recession, but we're coming out of that recession, and it's time for us to talk about how we're going to allocate resources going forward. We call upon the governor-elect and the legislature to work hard at stabilizing state funds so that education funds can also be stabilized. If we know what it costs to provide an adequate education to every child in Illinois, we need to be able to stabilize state funding to deal with that. Our adequacy model does include the opportunity for us to scale that over time and increment that into place over time. So we're not asking for everything all at one moment. But we do think the state has a lot of work to do to stabilize its funding streams and also modernize those funding streams in order to be able to provide adequate educational funding for schools into the future. And the third piece has to do with basically an efficiency issue that we've dealt with for years and years in Illinois schools. And it goes like this. Schools must determine their final decision on personnel for the following school year by April 1 of each year. But they don't know their funding until about the end of May when the legislature finishes its work with the budget. We think that's backwards, and it makes a very inefficient and ineffective school district to be able to deal with that kind of unknown at that particular point in time. So we'd like to call for a concept called a 2-year funding model for schools, where we would know in advance what the next year's foundation level or funding level would be for schools, and schools can plan accordingly. Otherwise, we're basically working in the dark in regard to our next school year. And you can imagine how difficult it is if by June 15th you know what your funding is going to look like, and now you're trying to, in 45, 50 days, put a staff together that's adequately prepared to handle opening those doors for school kids in August. That's just very difficult, and it's not appropriate really in terms of a business model for how we run our schools. So adequate funding based upon a model that identifies a unique foundation level for every school district based on its student needs and its geographic location, stabilizing education funding, and then finally correcting this inefficiency that exists in timing between when we notify personnel and when we know what our budgets look like. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Craig Williams. He's the president of the Superintendents group specializing in diversity, and he's going to speak a little bit to his involvement with Vision 2020.
Thanks. Good morning. My name is Craig Williams, president of the Superintendents Commission for the Study of Demographics and Diversity. As you've heard about Vision 2020, the great power and the promise of Vision 2020 is the partnership. The Illinois Association of School Administrators, the Illinois Principals Association, the Illinois Association for Regional Superintendents, the Illinois Association for School Boards, and the Illinois Association for School Business Officials. This is the first time that these partners have come together as educators, as professionals, as parents, to put together a plan that represents the hundreds and thousands of educators and the hundreds and thousands of students in the state of Illinois that reflects the vision for educators. We're very excited about that. We know that this plan again has promise. We know that it has power, and we've come together as educators and as partners to ensure that this plan moves forward with the voice of our memberships and with the voice of the constituents that we represent. So we're very pleased to present this plan. As we move forward, you'll hear a lot more about how these organizations are working together to make sure that this plan is rolled out and introduced throughout this great state of Illinois. I'd like to turn this over to Pat now. Conclude this. Thank you.
I'm Pat Del Santo. I'm the president of the Illinois Association of Regional School Superintendents. Thank you. We have been involved with my colleagues as directors and presidents of the other organizations in a statewide grassroots campaign to put Vision 2020 in the forefront of education for the state of Illinois. Vision 2020 is a blueprint for how to fulfill the promise that the legislators, the educators, and community members have made to the students of Illinois.
Absolutely, and the model has three major components to it. So you have this overall student growth model. That would be an element, one of basically three major elements of the accountability model, what we would call a grading system, if you will, for that school district. Then the second piece is what many people would call the compliance section. So what are all of those statutory requirements that a school district must meet and do on a year-to-year basis? And you've got to check those off to make sure all those are being met. But that third component is the uniqueness that each school district has and demonstrates on behalf of its taxpayers and its students. And the examples that we often give are three examples. And you start right here in central Illinois at a school district called Leroy. Leroy School District is by Bloomington Normal. And in Leroy, they have a cadaver class for their high school physiology students. I believe it's the only class like that in the state of Illinois. It's important to that district. It's important to those taxpayers, that Board of Education, and those students. You go down into southeastern Illinois on the Indiana border to a town called Robinson. In that town, it's important to graduate kids with a high degree of understanding and a skill in welding, because if you do that and you have that high degree of skill in welding, and many times that's a dual credit program with the local community college, they can come right out of high school with a high degree of skill in welding and go to work for the Marathon Oil Factory, earning a very substantial living right out of high school with that skill. Or you can go to the northwest suburbs into Barrington. And in Barrington, you can walk down their halls in their high school and go to their business entrepreneurial class where they're developing apps and they're developing small CEOs and small entrepreneurs, if you will, for new businesses in their town. And that's what's important in Barrington, and that's what's important in Robinson, and that's what's important in Leroy. And that's that contextual piece that we're referring to in this accountability model that allows a local district to show what is important to our kids, our customers, if you will, and our taxpayers, the people that are paying much of the bill to provide that school district. So there's really three distinct components that would come together to give an aggregate view, a measuring stick, of that school district. So I don't think there's any quick and easy outs for people to hide behind some sort of very low functioning school district, because you're going to have periodically you're going to have what Jason Leahy refers to as a look under the hood, referring to almost a mechanic pulling the hood up and looking under and making sure that those results that are being reported are in fact occurring with a high degree of fidelity and furthering the education of kids. It's a typical environment of overregulation that creates inefficiency, so you spend time fulfilling mandates that create inefficiencies that we believe, quite frankly, if we could just have the local control to look at those and make local decisions of how we spend time and how we spend money to educate kids, we probably would sidestep around some of these mandates. And just last spring, we had 24 brand new mandates passed on schools at a time when funding was being cut. So it's really an issue that's become a real problem now, and it has to be addressed. And we're hoping that this plan gets this discussion on the front burner here at the Capitol. And I'll turn it over to my colleagues for maybe some examples of that.
Well, just very quickly, there are dozens of examples, but local boards of education should operate with some flexibility to determine the best use of resources locally. A good example might be the mandate for physical education. While everyone would like to see physical education every day for every child, maybe in a community they've had to make a decision to cut elementary teachers by reduction in force and end up with class sizes of 30 or 35, but still have PE at the high school level every day for 40 minutes. There might be other models that would work better in that community and ensure a lower class size at the elementary. So what we've really done with that mandate is taken away the local school board and administrators' ability to make a decision they think is best for their students locally. And that's just one example. There are dozens of examples like that. The other thing about mandates is, first of all, if they are that essential, then fund them and send the money along with them. The second is, once you mandate whatever it is, it's going to cost more just because it's a mandate. So that's an inefficiency that's built into overregulation and over-mandating. I think the key point of this proposal is we need to have the discussion. We need to turn some of that responsibility and authority over to the locally elected officials who know more and care more about their students really than anyone could in Springfield or certainly in Washington.
Well, I think what this does for us is it provides focus in ensuring that we're focused on the things that kids really need in order to be educated for life after they graduate from high school, whether that be the pathway towards a four-year institution, a trade school, or directly into the workforce. Excuse me. It seems like every time I talk to you, Terry, I'm coughing. So anyway, but you know, within this plan, let me get right down to assessment, because that is a big issue right now for schools and for parents as they look at this coming school year. What we want to ensure with this plan is something like assessment is put in its proper place, that it informs instruction, and that it's not crowding out educational opportunities for kids. We're spending a lot of times testing kids. We want to make sure that they get the instruction and those opportunities that they need. You know, with regards to the 21st century learning, who can deny that technology has transformed our lives, and that we need to ensure that kids have those tools to help them transform their educational experience. And it can do that. It can bring, you know, Mandarin Chinese into the most rural parts of the state. But you've got to have broadband access to do that. And really, quite frankly, right now, from an infrastructural perspective, for us to even deliver the assessment that we've committed to in the state of Illinois, we don't have the broadband infrastructure to do that, to provide it in an online way so that schools can get the feedback in a timely fashion and then make quick instructional decisions for those kids right now. So it's antiquated. It needs ratcheting up. We need to put the resources to it and get it to where it needs to be so that our kids can be successful.
If I could, Terry, I'd like to follow up on that and just give you a glimpse of what's coming right around the corner. Is in 21st century learning, one of the plans in Vision 2020 is to simply take the best, if you allow me to use this example, take the best 4 biology teachers in Illinois, couple them with one of the giant international well-known technology companies, build the best scope and sequence for a Biology 1 course, tag all of the internet resources available, then make that available to every Biology 1 course in Illinois for free, no charge, so that every biology teacher in Illinois could have the same scope, sequence, and internet resources to teach the very best Biology 1 course, and then replicate that throughout the high school experience for all your major content areas, and then start to back that down through our curriculum. That costs virtually nothing to do. It's an investment of human capital, but it costs the state nothing to do, and it certainly brings equity in curriculum, which is another issue that we want to focus on in Vision 2020.
Well, I don't think we should ever keep lawmakers from bringing issues to the Capitol that their constituents have identified as important in their communities. I think they're well intended. I think, though, from our perspective as educators, we have opposed mandates, we have opposed legislation for years. We felt it was a responsible thing to do to bring together a plan that defines what we're for. And in the same manner that a member of the General Assembly would bring forth some proposal, we from the education community felt it was our responsibility to begin to bring those proposals forward and tell folks what we're for. It's received a lot of support. The Illinois PTA, by the way, has just endorsed this plan. The Ounce of Prevention Fund has endorsed the plan. The Center for Tax and Budget Accountability is supportive of the plan. We've presented the plan to dozens of other associations, the Business Roundtable, the IEA and IFT have both been briefed on this plan. So we think that this is a broader coming together of the education community and business and parents and community engagement that should make a difference to lawmakers. We're hopeful that it will. We're going to be bringing legislation forward in the spring that will be hopefully adopted by legislators the same way they adopt their own legislation, but from the educator's perspective. And we want to thank everyone for coming. I don't know if, Brent, you want to close this up, but we appreciate very much the opportunity for the first swipe at this. There will be more in January, February, as the spring session unfolds. We'll have some meat to put on these bones for you. And we just ask that you look at this and consider that it's coming from the education community and that we feel it's important for our children.
Thank you.